Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by onlinegreatbooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listener. This is Brett. I'm the producer of the Online Great Books podcast. First, sorry we were off last week, but I think that's going to work out for everybody because you're going to want to feel well rested before digging into this one. We return to an Online Great Books favorite, Walker Percy, and his 1983 mock self-help book, as it has been called, Lost in the Cosmos. I was first introduced to Walker Percy by Scott and Karl. This feels like it was a couple years ago at this point, and was motivated to go and find and read one of his essays called Loss of the Creature. I would recommend that to you as well if you're just learning about it now. So I was excited to see his name come up again. Hopefully you are too. And you know, one of the things about a show like this, and I think Scott and Karl even mentioned this, is maybe there's a concern when you have such great conversations about so many books and essays and excerpts that maybe people won't go and read this material for themselves. If these guys are just talking their way through the book, yeah, I got the gist of it now, some might say. Well, today's conversation is going to challenge that because Scott and Karl do not even touch chapter 1 until like 45 minutes into this audio. So today, while you're waiting for them to talk about the book, you could easily obtain the Kindle version for yourself in that time. Now, I also mention that there's a long lead-in to the discussion of the book because the very, very beginning of the discussion is like really fence-heavy, like a lot of fence talk. And, you know, people have varying levels of interest in fences. So if you hear that and you start to think, oh my gosh, is it 45 minutes of fence stuff before the book? No, the fence stuff, there's a lot of fence stuff for a non-fence focused podcast, but they move fairly swiftly, I would say, into a very valuable setup discussion for Lost in the Cosmos. I just want you to know what's going to happen there. There's a bit of a cliffhanger ending. We're trying to keep these at, a certain length. So make sure you check back next week for part 2. And make sure you visit onlinegreatbooks.com and get on the mailing list as well. And without further delay, here is Scott and Karl's exploration of Walker Percy's Lost in the Cosmos, the last self-help book. Thanks for listening. Thank you for your time. Here we go.
I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Shute.
Brett's already told them everything they need to know.
Oh, okay.
You know, next week we're going to cover, well, not next week. This will be a 2-part show. So next week will be more of this. And then the week after that will be the Joel Salatin book, Polyface Micro, about using his methods on the homestead scale instead of his 10,000 broilers, 1,000 head of grass-fed beef, 1,000 rabbits, 1,000 hogs.
Yeah, I was looking through it. It's going to be fun. The one point that I got from it is if you're on the small scale, which I will be on the small scale, you still have to have water. You still have to have fencing.
Oh, God. Fencing is killing me, Karl.
I'm sorry. It hasn't begun to kill me yet. I went and bought my high-tension wire, banged up my finger doing it. I bled all over.
There you go.
In the cold, but I've got a whole bunch of stuff to put up. You got to get your fence down if you're going to have critters. You don't want them walking through the neighborhood. That happened. I was driving through Oklahoma last year in March, I think, and I was driving down to, is it Locust Grove?
Yeah.
And I had to stop because there were cows in the road.
That's a no-no. I got up late last summer, early fall, and there were cow pies on the driveway, and went down the hill to where all the fruit trees are, and there were 5 steers grazing in amongst my fruit trees. They were not mine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's dumb.
Should have took them to market.
I know. I don't know what the common law is on that. Does Magna Carta have something to say about if somebody's steers are in your orchard for 7 days, they're yours? But this place that I'm on, The fence is, they tuned in for all the hot fencing talk, Karl.
Yep.
The fence is old enough that it's pre-T-post.
Mm-hmm.
So there are all kinds of weird stamped steel posts and oil field pipe and sucker rod posts and whatever. So it's old. And I would be better off if there had been no fence whatsoever.
Right.
Well, here's what happens is you put up a fence, and then every bird in a mile and a half eats until he's full, and then he lands on that fence. And then he poops out those seeds while he sits on that fence. And they're enveloped in a slurry of nitrogen and other nutrients. And then they grow. All of that stuff grows right there in the fence.
Right in the fence line. Yeah.
Yeah. So every cedar berry, every mulberry, every hackberry, those birds have planted them diligently in the fence.
It's fun when you go out and you find a 12-foot trunk with barbed wire going right through the middle of it.
Right. You call that
Which
fun.
means how many years has that been neglected?
Yeah. Forever.
Oh, but that'll be fun. So we'll do that next time. What are we doing? I know Brett already told them what we're doing this week.
Yeah, our beloved friend Walker Percy's book, Lost in the Cosmos, the last self-help book, a very, very strange book. It is not a novel. It is not a nonfiction book. It is, I don't know what the hell it is. He says it's the last self-help book, and he asks, like all self-help books do, 20 questions of the reader. Yeah. And then you have to choose one. I don't know if this is a part satire, part deadly serious attempt to get people to self-examine in a Persian sort of way that left me cold.
So let me talk about Percy in general. So I saw him in person in 1989.
Walker Percy.
At the college where I attended. You'll be able to figure it out. I'm going to lose all my OPSEC here. The college that I attended gave a Laetare medal every year. Laetare is one of the Sundays, I think, in Lent. I don't know. Anyway, they give a medal to some highfalutin American Catholic, as the university sees it. They usually get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you haven't gotten one.
No, I haven't gotten one.
So they're
usually
all wrong.
They're very good at picking the highfalutin. They're not so good at picking the Catholic. I'll just say that.
All right.
They grabbed up Walker Percy, probably because he was dying. I think he died within a few months after getting the award. Yeah, he died in 1990, and this was in 89, so it was within 6 months. And I was playing in the graduation band. I was a musician, and we would stay for a week after everybody else went home, and we would drink too much. It was gin that year. And we had nothing else to do. We would stick around for a week practicing all the graduation music, and then we would play for graduation. And this guy got up, and Walker Percy, this white-haired guy, I had no idea who he was. And I didn't really pay any attention to the speech. And then when I discovered his stuff later and found out that whatever it was that he writes, it's for me.
Right.
And gobbled it all up. I found out that he was there and that I'd seen him, and I like an idiot, hadn't paid any attention. So I went on a trip. I happened to be in North Carolina for another band thing.
Well, I have to stop you there and let you know that the opposite happened to me. The opposite thing happened to me. In about 1990, I shook George H.W. Bush's hand, and I thought it was a big deal, and later on I found out it was a nothing.
Right.
It's true.
Right. He demagnified himself. So I happened to be in North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which was where the Walker Percy archives were. I hope they're still there. And I went back in the archives. Everyone else was off having barbecue or whatever. And I was digging in the archives. It was another band trip. And I dug out the speech that he gave. It's 5 paragraphs. This little speech that he gave, the Laetare Medal speech of Walker Percy in 1989. And I just want to read the last paragraph. The motto of the Laetare Medal is, I understand, Magna est veritas et prevalebit. In other words, truth is great and it will prevail. I like to think it applies even to the humble vocation of the novelist. In my last novel, The Thanatos Syndrome, I tried to show how, while truth should prevail, it is a disaster when only one kind of truth prevails at the expense of others. If only one kind of truth prevails, the technical and abstract truth of science, then nothing stands in the way of the demeaning of and destruction of human life for what appears to some to be reasonable short-term goals. It is no accident, I think, that German science, great as it was, ended in the Holocaust. The novelist likes to irritate people by pointing this out. It is his pleasure and vocation to reveal in his own elusive and indirect way man's need of and his openings to truths other than scientific propositions. He is one of the lowliest handmaidens to the truth of the good news, but if he or any of us succeeds even a bit in this task, then I say, laetare indeed, let us rejoice. That's what laetare means in Latin. And I think that's nearly his last word. There's a difficulty when there is one sort of truth that is allowed to prevail, that there's only one way of understanding who you are and of how you ought to live.
And Karl's a relativist.
That's not true.
Well, I mean, like so what you're saying is you have to live your own truth.
No, that is not what I'm saying. It's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is truth is bigger than peer review.
Whoa. Yeah, seems right. Especially when you're without peer.
Right. You know, my buddy in college, he would say, it's not peer pressure because I'm better than you.
There you go.
He's probably not listening. So this book, Lost in the Cosmos, is, well, it's an odd book. It's a really strange book. It's not a novel. It's a self-help book. Or let me rephrase that. It is a self-help book. He's rolling his eyes at me.
Oh, my.
Dear listener. I figured this wouldn't be a Scott Hambrick book.
It is not. I'm just not an existentialist. I'm not a lot of things, but I can typically relate to the Marxist. For example, their attempt to deal with the disaffectation of the worker and alienation of our work and things like that. I dig it. Then we differ. So I typically can look at these different schools that I don't necessarily agree with and agree on the problem. But with the existentialists, I don't know what the problem is. I just don't even get it.
So for Marxism, it's the alienation of the worker from his work. For existentialism, it'd be the alienation of the worker from himself.
Right. Yeah. Infogalactic says that existentialism is a term applied to the work of certain late 19th and 20th century European philosophers who, despite profound doctrinal differences, shared the belief that philosophical thinking begins with the human subject, not merely the thinking subject, but the acting, feeling, living human individual. Okay, fine. But in practice, that's not what it has become. When you get to Camus or even Percy, it's become sort of I don't know. I can't even be generous about it. Some sort of self-conscious hand-wringing about the self that makes it difficult for them to deal with anything else, is the way I see it. And I don't get it. Like if you build a doghouse when you're a little kid and you hit your thumb with a hammer, like it fixes all the existentialist stuff.
Yeah, but then you get done building doghouses and you go off to college and you get your medical degree, and there you are in New York City dealing with, this would be Percy's biography,
right?
Dealing with patients or a Southerner in New York City, and you start thinking, I know it sounds silly. We were having lunch the other day, and I knew this was going to be silly for you. But you imagine Percy's there. He's like, who the hell am I? What am I doing here? How did it come to this?
Well, I understand the last two pieces of that.
It's like the Talking Heads song.
That's exactly what I was thinking about before we turned this on. This is not my beautiful house. I understand the last two questions he asked. What am I doing here and how did this happen? I think is what they were, something like that. But that who am I thing, I don't get that. Like if you
Well, so I had this image where I think if you were to take Scott Hambrick and slice him with a meat slicer, it's all Scott Hambrick all the way through. I think you've been you. I've read a while ago you posted some of your high school papers or your college papers, and I read a little bit of it, and it's you. It's the same you. You know, it's all you. That's not the case for. I don't think it's the case for all of us. I think it's. I'll give an example. Gaming is very, very big right now.
Yeah.
And I remember looking up the average age of the gamer, and it's something like 40.
Yahtzee.
So it's not 15-year-olds playing Call of Duty. It's disaffected adults playing it. And these games, and they're very well done. Some of them are really well done. I've done it myself. You save the universe in this game. You're a hero. There's a love interest. Sometimes what people will do, you fire up the game, and there's the avatar generation. You've got to figure out what you look like.
I never do that. I just accept the first one.
Yeah.
I never do that.
You're not fine-tuning the nose and the hair and the skin complexion and. I mean, heck, lots of people play cross-gender.
Right.
So you are not yourself when you're in this game. You are playing as someone else, as someone very, very different from yourself. And that's what makes it attractive. That's what people want to do, I think.
Yeah.
They don't want to be who they are. They want to be Master Chief.
Yeah.
Or Lara Croft. They're fleeing the self.
Yeah. I can sympathize with and understand someone who maybe is disappointed with how they turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back up. Percy in this book and so many of the existentialists are hyper aware of themselves and stand apart from themselves and observe themselves. So
Yes.
I thought, well, if I was talking to a existentialist of goodwill, there are few of them, but if I was talking to Percy and about this, I
There's
think
a
that he
couple
could
of them.
maybe,
There's a couple of them.
Well, I know there's a couple. I just, Percy, maybe Karl. I can imagine the existentialist saying,
Camus.
I don't know about Camus. Come on now.
Have you read any of his stuff?
Yeah.
He's a good-hearted guy.
I have. But I can imagine him wondering how, if one doesn't have that existence preceding essence, sort of existentialist idea, how do you introspect? How do you introspect without and yet avoid the existentialist crisis?
Yeah. Well, that existence preceding essence, that's Sartre. He's one of the bad ones. He's a Maoist.
But I think even Percy here. Now this is one book that's a weird thing. Maybe it's on one level. Maybe it's satire. It's one book, but all of this questioning of one's existence and of oneself, even if he doesn't explicitly say that that's one of his axioms, he can't move past that to deal with essentials. And we get this in the goofy Heidegger thing that we read not too long ago.
I noticed, by the way, in Sherlock Holmes, in one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, it's one where the nobleman's child is kidnapped. The German teacher at the school who ends up getting clubbed in the head and killed, his name was Heidegger.
Mm-hmm.
What means? Which is fiction.
ACD knew, man.
Maybe it's not fiction.
It's the genetic type. He knew.
Sartre says existence precedes essence. For him, I think Sartre is garbage, but
clearly.
There's radical freedom where you can define yourself as you like. I don't think that's the problem. I think I think this book and the novels are an attempt to get out of that trap.
To get out of it, but can you get out of it if that's where you start? I mean,
maybe
Percy's behind the 8 ball here, I think.
Well, maybe we should. I want to go into a little bit of the beginning.
Well, hang on. I want to deal with this problem of introspection.
Okay.
So I'll talk to you and not Percy. So, do you think it's possible for the mindful person or the conscientious person to be introspective and avoid the existentialist trap? Trap, that's a loaded word, but the problem of existentialism.
Yes, I think it is. You need to figure out a mode of self-placement. I'm sorry to talk like an existentialist, but or a guardian.
It's gross.
It's a problem that, well, gosh, it's in Augustine. Who am I? Well, he figures it out. He spends the whole book talking to God and asking God, who am I? And there's his answer. But it takes him a while to get there. I think there are those of us who have first thoughts, second thoughts, third thoughts, and fourth thoughts about things.
Illuminate that, Karl. You and I have talked about it, but tell them what you mean.
It's not possible to eliminate it. So I had this experience the other day. So I was getting upset. I don't even know. I want to talk about how it had to do with CRT and modern politics and stuff. And I was mad at a show on the classical music station that was promoting. It was only promoting singers of a certain ethnicity. And I was like, why does that matter? But then I stopped and I said, well, why am I mad about this? And then I stopped again and I thought, why am I thinking about myself being mad about this? So you end up dissecting your whole way of thinking. It's
wise all the way down, bro.
It's right. It's like you end up being a novelist in your own life. So you're observing yourself as you interact with other people, which means you're not quite interacting with other people. That's probably a sickness. But it's a problem, I think, that comes with prosperity. It comes with, not having to go plow your field or cut wood or do any of the other things that you might need to do for your life, which would say, well, who am I? It doesn't matter. I've got to feed the chickens. Mm-hmm. Well, let's say you don't have to feed the chickens and you have prosperity and you've gone to a good college and you've got a good degree, and now what?
Yeah.
Now what? And so you can see this with the, I think you can see this with the reluctance of people to get married these days.
Yeah.
To get married is to bind yourself to another person, to put yourself in a particular self-placement, ideally for the rest of your life. It's supposed to be for the rest of your life. And people aren't doing it. Because it's like collapsing the waveform. Mm-hmm. When you open the box and you find out whether Schrodinger's cat is alive or dead. They don't want to do that. They don't want to collapse the waveform. They don't want to ever be anything. Because they have no idea what to be. The old ways, I would connect this with McIntyre, the old ways of situating yourself in a community with a telos, with an end, they don't seem to work anymore.
Yeah, I think it works. They just don't have, they lack the purpose or the telos.
Well, but, if you had boomer parents that left you alone all the time and then divorced each other and, your life is kind of a mess. You never had real parents.
Right.
The options are not so obvious to you anymore.
Right.
Right? You've been told your whole life, you can do whatever you want. You can be whatever you want. Which is garbage advice because there's no content to it. You could be whatever you want. Well, fine, but what should I be? You're just telling somebody, the hypothetical person, you're not really anything. You're a nothing. You're a zero that could be anything. You're an unhinged function that could attach to anything.
So if you are the perfect exemplar of the 21st century existentialist, then all these comments that you've made here really aren't necessarily about introspection or self-awareness. They're about a more basic confusion as to, like, well, okay, maybe I introspect. What am I actually looking at?
Well, I mean, that is a question, too, that Percy talks about. The self is a very philosophically tricky thing. It's not something Socrates ever talks about. He says in the beginning, you find out that if you write down a list of adjectives that are good adjectives, and then you write down a list of bad adjectives, and then you read the lists, you might find that the good ones all apply to you and the bad ones.
Right.
The opposites also apply to you.
Well, Thomas fixes all this.
So, are you brave? Are you cowardly? Dear listener, are you handsome? Are you ugly? Are you awkward? Are you graceful? You might find that they all apply to you. Well, then think, how is that? I have a little pocket knife in my hand. It's not sharp and dull. It's one thing. The self isn't quite that way. It's not, or in other words, to go back to that speech that I read, to try to think of the self in terms of scientific truth is a mistake. It's not that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the evidence that it's not that sort of thing, that little experiment where you write the list of adjectives, can show that something's up. There's something weird about it. Can I go to the text?
Yeah, you're going to have to tell me all about it.
Do you have a Kindle version or a paper?
I've got this paper one. I've got the Picador Press paper one here in my hot little hand.
I don't have page numbers.
Of course.
My paper copy is buried probably in a box in a shed somewhere.
Yep.
So I'll just read the title, which gives you the gist. The Lost in the Cosmos, the last self-help book, or The Strange Case of the Self Yourself, the Ghost Which Haunts the Cosmos, or How You Can Survive in the Cosmos, about which you know more and more while knowing less and less about yourself, this despite 10,000 self-help books, 100,000 psychotherapists, and 100 million fundamentalist Christians, or Why is it that of all the billions and billions of strange objects in the cosmos, novas, quasars, pulsars, black holes, you are beyond doubt the strangest? I don't know that I ought to read all of it.
It just goes on and on.
This is the book Lost in the Cosmos is a reaction to a TV show that Carl Sagan put out that I loved when I was a kid.
I loved it
might
too.
Be too young. Yeah. And it was called Cosmos. I had the book. And loved this show. And it was Carl Sagan, who worked at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and he was giving the Enlightenment view of the world and explaining everything in the world in terms of science, never completely neglecting the self. He's an anti-existentialist, completely neglecting that there is such thing as a self or anything to really be concerned about, so that the whole history, it stops, it goes to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and then nothing happens to Galileo. Just nothing. Nothing happens. You remember that show?
Oh, I loved that show. I love that show.
But it was destructive.
It was horrific. I've come to hate it. If I wasn't so busy building fence, I would find Sagan's grave and dig him up and kick him around some. Not only is it not existentialist, it's a meaninglessness philosophy. Nothing has any meaning. And in the last scene, or in the closing episode of that show, he does this, the pale blue dot talk. You can go look up this little chunk on YouTube, Sagan, the pale blue dot. It's like maybe 2 or 3 minutes long. I don't know. But he worked at JPL, so he's clearly a government op, and he's paid to, destroy this sense of worth in people across the United States. And he was part of the Voyager project. And he, at some point, when Voyager was getting ready to leave the solar system, he raised hell and eventually had his way, such that they expended these valuable resources, propellant and energy on board the Voyager spacecraft, to turn it around It had a forward-facing camera. The camera was facing the direction of travel. And he got them to turn this thing around and take a picture of Earth from beyond the solar system. So the scale of this photograph is mind-bogglingly large, such that the image of Earth is just a fuzzy, pale blue dot. And then this POS waxes eloquent about how because they took this picture from this place where we never should have even been, that, frankly, you're meaningless.
Right.
You know, the cosmos is so large and the Earth is so small, and then you're a small piece of that, and everything that man has accomplished has happened in just the blink of an eye, and because of the vast size of everything, you're worthless. And I'm in a lot of ways, I'm solipsistic. Like, I'm the measure of everything. You know, I remember going to this stupid fucking Sunday school class, and this guy's like, well, do you ever just look up at the stars at night and it just make you feel so small? I'm like, they make me feel huge. Like, none of it means anything if I'm not there. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to see it, my answer is, who fucking cares? The people in our sentience give everything its value.
So, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's this character, Zaphod Beeblebrox,
right.
Who's president of the galaxy, and they're going to torture him. So they're going to put him in this absolute perspective machine, which is supposed to like give him the blue dot talk and show him how tiny he is. And he goes into it, and he comes out, and he says, well, it told me I was the center of the universe. That's you. That's
all I see. You know, and this guy, his name was Alan, that was telling me this, and I love Alan, but it's just stupid. But in current year, that sort of attitude is some sort of credit that people who want to believe they're smart give. You know, they say those kinds of things to show how broad their perspective is, and it's basically disgusting altruistic bull.
What's our public astrophysicist? What is his name? 3 names: Degrassi Tyson.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Like Degrassi High School, isn't that Canadian show?
Yeah.
He's the worst Twitter account. It's just the worst. It's all that crap about how you don't really mean anything. And so let's go further. So this is what they were talking about at JPL and in this show Cosmos, targeted to little kids like me.
Yep.
That you're insignificant. But they're very, very proud. And this is some of the oddness that Percy is talking about. They're very, very proud that they put these gold plates on these Voyager machines. And like a record player with sounds of Earth and, prime numbers so that the aliens could know that we were intelligent. Well, if you're in an insignificant nothing, there's nothing to talk about. What's the point of trying to make contact with other intelligences if we're all just nothing? It's only selves that want to actually talk to people.
The thing's nonsensical. It was designed to break the sense of self in the individual and the American people. I'm just convinced of it. And even if Sagan didn't know that, if he's so foolish and such a useful idiot that he didn't know it, that's still what the purpose ended up being. I hate that pale blue dot thing, like poison. Somebody the other day posted it in our Slack, and they're like, oh, this is so profound at Online Great Books. I just had to pile on. It's disgusting. It's reprehensible. There is a straight line between wanting to just euthanize people and that sort of view. What difference does it make? They're not special. Hey, there's 7 billion people. What's 7 billion minus 1? And when the 7 billion don't even matter anyway, they're just in a pale blue dot. Anyway, these existentialists kiss my ass.
Wait, no, hold on. Wait a minute. You jump from Carl Sagan to existentialists. You're conflating the blue dot people with my people.
Yeah, you're right. He is reacting to this in a negative way. Percy is, but gosh, it makes me sick.
All right, I want to do a little bit of the preliminary quiz. So back in the days when we had bookstores, you would find this book in a bookstore. And he suggests you take this little quiz in the beginning to see if you ought to buy the book. It's just raising questions. He has this thing. Imagine you read the astrology column. You read the Aries. You say, yeah, I think that. What does it say? It says something like, you have a knack of creating an atmosphere of thought and movement unhampered by petty jealousies, but you have the tendency to scatter your talents to the four winds. And you think, oh, that's right. And then you find out that you've read the Gemini column by mistake, and you go read the Aries. Nothing hurts you more than to be unjustly mistreated or suspected, but you have a way about you. And you think, that's me too. Why is it that the self is such a thing that cannot be defined? He's trying to get you to see that. The self is not like all the other things in the world.
If he just read Aristotle's Ethics, that he would know that the self, it's not like this.
I don't think so. I think so. I like Solovyev's comment on Aristotle. Soloviev was a Russian Christian writer, and he says, "Why in the world would I care for moderation? Well, if I have a finite lifetime and there's nothing beyond this, why in the world would I want to be moderate?"
Well, because of the practical reality of what people are. You can't be all of this or all of that. So the best thing you can do is walk the edge.
Why is it the best? Best for who?
Well, it's best for you because we want to live a happy life, which, according to reason.
Yeah, but you're sneaking things in there. You're sneaking the presumption that there is a self that is choosing the good. We were talking about this in seminar a few days ago about the problem of practical reason. An ethics book isn't enough. You have to choose the good in a particular situation. Well, you choose it like the wise man would choose it, but who's the wise man? Why would you care to make yourself courageous or temperate? It might be more fun to be intemperate.
You know that we deal with these things.
Yeah.
Fun's not the calculus. And the self clearly exists because there's something having an experience of all this and there's something asking the question. So we can that's just a bedrock. We don't even have to do A equals A. Descartes later says it, but we don't have to address the self.
Okay. Let me get, I think we do.
Well, if it's not the self that's doing it, what is it? Doing it being the philosophy.
Okay. So look at the animal world and compare it to the human. For the animals, there's no need for a self. The lion's just going to eat because it's what lions do.
That's right.
The cow's just going to chew grass because it's what it does. The human might not eat.
Mm-hmm.
Might choose not to eat. Has the capacity of choosing not to eat. A human could starve himself. When I was young, there was Bobby Sands, Irish hunger striker, killed himself by not eating to protest British involvement in Northern Ireland. Animals don't do that. Or Percy talks about it. One of the oddnesses of the human being is the sexual drive. He says, this is at location 128, if the sexual drive is but one of several biological needs, why are we living in the most eroticized society in history? Why don't TV, films, billboards, magazines feature culinary delights? For example, huge chocolate cakes, hams, roast strawberries instead of women's bodies. Or are you more confused about sexuality than any other phenomenon in the cosmos? Do you know why it is that men and women exhibit sexual behavior undreamed of among the other several million species? With every conceivable sexual relation between persons, or with only one person, or between male and female, or between two male persons, or two female persons, or two males and one female, or two females and one male. Relationships, moreover, which can implicate every orifice and appendage of the human body and which bear no relation to the reproduction and survival of the species. That's a weird thing. C.S. Lewis says somewhere, if everything's just great, and it's just another urge, he's probably copying from C.S. Lewis. Lewis says, why don't we have clubs where you can go in, they're kind of dark, you pay money, you pay a cover charge, you go and you sit in a seat, and they very, very slowly lift the cover off a perfectly cooked dinner. and then put it back down and don't let you eat it.
Yeah, I have often said I'm way too straight to go to strip clubs.
There's something odd going on.
I'm supposed to just look. Like, I can't do that.
No.
Sure, but this guy's faith should have answered a lot of these things for him.
Oh, it probably does, but it took him a while to get there. All right, so you say his faith should have answered this for him. Okay. How do you get to be the sort of person that can have faith?
Well, you were elected to be such from time immemorial.
Yes, but everything's been explained to you by Carl Sagan.
Right.
And your science textbook. And so there's no way to explain the strangeness of the human sexuality, for example. You're just another animal, right?
I think that's how you come to the faith, right? I think that's actually how you come to it. Sagan has nothing to say about this, about these odd problems.
You might not notice the odd problems until you stumble on a book like Lost in the Cosmos.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. But I think we all run into at least some. Well, maybe we don't.
Oh, come on. You know all sorts of people that don't have any idea that there's anything wrong.
Oh, the NPCs. Yeah, for sure. But here's the thing. Well, I mean, we're just all over the place here. They're not going to read this fucking book either. Come on. They're not going to read this book.
No, not too many of them.
No, they're not going to read it.
But, the the intelligent, self-absorbed 22-year-old living in Columbus, Ohio might end up reading it.
Maybe.
Because he did.
I think Aristotle's explanation of like motion and appetites helps explain a lot of this weird stuff. Not a lot of it, not all of it. He doesn't fix all of this. And then by the time you get to Aquinas and when he describes this highest possible desire, that for that beatific vision, he starts to clean this up.
That presumes that your culture is somewhat intact.
Well,
and if you're living in the ruins of the 20th century or the 21st century, is anything intact?
No, but does Thomism require an intact culture for it to be true?
It might require an intact culture for you to be able to realize that it's true.
That might be. I was having a little discussion with Roshan. Hey, Roshan.
Uh-huh.
In Slack, he's reading Aristotle on interpretation. He brought up some problems with language and definition. Almost everybody has. You look at a tree, and there's a tree over there. Like if you hit it with your car, it's going to bend the car up. The tree is real. But then when you look at it, you have this image of a tree in your head, which is not the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that image in your head, you grunt something, and that grunt is a symbol that then is for tree.
Yeah.
You make an utterance, and that's a symbol for tree. And there are three they are three things. And the modern person really has been taught from in utero that none of those three things are trustworthy. And Aristotle and Thomas would say, no. The tree is real. It has an essence which is universal, and you may or may not be able to perceive that clearly and cleanly. But when you say tree, it refers to that real live essence of treeness that is always there. And if you have trouble with that, that's on you. That has nothing to do with treeness.
There's something that's missing from your description that I want to bring in. So Aquinas and Aristotle and Plato and Avicenna, for that matter, the way that you come to the knowledge of universals. For Socrates, it's recollection. In other words, you're remembering your divine homeland.
Mm-hmm.
For Aristotle, in De Anima, it is this agent intellect which somehow abstracts that which is knowable from the tree, and if anything is immortal, it's this, he says.
Right.
For Augustine, for Thomas, this is your participation in the divine. that your knowledge actually comes about through the active agency of God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? All right, take all of that out because, we're moderns and we don't believe any of that stuff anymore. How do you ever know anything about the tree?
Well, the three people, Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato and Aquinas, four people, have explanations for how that comes about. But they all agree that there is treeness that they're referring to that has nothing to do with the person.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they all have that weird bit in it. So they don't really talk about the self, but to the extent that they do, that self that they're talking about is participating in a greater reality just in order to know a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big difference. And so you end up, in the current age, we're supposed to think that scientific truth is the truth of all truths, but there's no way to get to it.
Right.
There's just the scientific method. And the problem, Percy points this out, the scientist will explain everything in the universe except himself. Who's the guy looking through the telescope? Because he can't turn it back and figure out who it is that's actually knowing the stuff, or even how it is that he's knowing it.
Well, this line of discussion all came out because we're positing that maybe the modern, can't embrace the Thomist view.
It's harder. Yeah.
I think it probably is harder, but I think if you fall out of a treehouse, you're well on your way.
Yeah. I'm just thinking,
when you go FUD, like, do you really have questions about a greater reality or the self? It's axiomatic. Like, how much discussion do we need to have about it? Only people who had talked to disembodied voices across Zoom or played video games and, listened to radio and had, would wonder what the self was.
Or grow up in a row house and go off to college across the country and then move to a third place.
Yeah.
To start a job.
Yeah.
The deracinated moderns.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole lot that's difficult. There's no coincidence. Things seem to be more screwed up now.
Yeah. If you talk to my uncle about this, he would look at you like you had a horn growing out of your cheek or something. Like, I can't. And, the sort of smug, Carl Sagan or Neil deGrasse Tyson reaction to somebody like Uncle Henry would be that he's missing it. But Henry would be like, I've mashed my fingers. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, there is an experience of me that is irrefutable. And he's ultimately maybe not the measure of things, but the way all things are come to be known.
Yeah. I found it very, and I hope he doesn't screw it up so that I don't have to take this back, but I was very touched by one of your favorite singers who had all those marital problems and went off and nobody knew where he was and worked a ranch in Texas for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then appeared to have discovered, this is going to sound terrible, to have discovered himself.
Yeah. Well, see, they say discovered himself, but okay, it's Evan Felker, Turnpike Troubadours. He had fell in the bottle, and the band went on a hiatus, and he disappeared. He got a divorce, and he just disappeared. Well, come to find out, he'd been working as a ranch hand in South Texas, and nobody knew where he was. Except his ex-wife, and then he remarried her.
He got a revorce.
He undivorced, and some people might say that he found himself, but I would say that he aligned his priorities and that he was him all along.
He was him all along, but for a while he was thinking, should I be what Miranda Lambert wants me to be?
Nobody, including her, should do that.
Should I be what Nashville wants me to be, or should I?
Yeah.
What person should you be? All right, I want to get into the text a little bit. There's a lot of prologue because we really haven't. So there's 20 questions, and I want to briefly go through a few of these.
Minute 52. Let's get to the book.
Yeah. So chapter 1, the amnesic self. And so he's just going to propose these things, these weird things, and maybe you'll see him and maybe you don't. I bet more of you will see him than won't. And he talks about why is it that amnesia in movies seems attractive? Why is it that you might want to get rid of yourself? And he brings up an Ingrid Bergman movie where Gregory Peck has usefully lost his memory, and it just makes his life better. Chapter 2, the self as naught. It's about antique shopping. I thought it was funny. And he talks about why people want tables that don't look like tables.
Yeah, he gives examples of people using, here's a list of them. A lobster trap, a Coca-Cola sign propped on Coke crates, a stone slab from an old morgue, the hatch of a sailboat mounted on halves of a ship's wheels. Another was a cobbler's bench. And he says, then his question, why was not a single table designed as such rather than being a non-table doing duty as a table? A, because people have gotten tired of ordinary tables. B, because the 50 non-tables converted to use as tables make good conversation pieces. C, because it is a chance to make use of valuable odds and ends which otherwise would gather dust in the attic. Or
None
D,
of those are right.
Huh?
None of those are right.
Oh. D, because the self in the 20th century is a voracious knot which expands like the feeding vacuole of an amoeba, seeking to nourish and inform its own nothingness by ingesting new objects in the world, like a vacuole only succeeds in emptying them out.
Right. The ordinary table's no good. You have to have the fancy table. But then a fancy table is no good either after a while, and you have to get another table that isn't a table. Or maybe, in the end, you end up having to get an actual table, but there, the very oddness of using an actual table for a table is what makes it good. I know this is non-Hambrickian.
Well, I've noticed it. I've gone to somebody's loft, and they have an old card catalog with a piece of glass on top of it, and that's their, stupid table and behind their couch or whatever, And I'm like, they've got all these little drawers. What do they put in them? And you pull, and then the host goes to the bathroom. I go over there and open the drawer. There's nothing in it. Like, wait a minute. There are 48 drawers in this fucking thing, and they don't use the drawers.
No, they don't. It's just having a card catalog as a table. The next chapter, fashion. It's very similar.
Most of these, he gives us maybe 4, like some of them he gives like 20 choices, A through, Q or something. And almost every time I'm like, well, none of these are the answer. These people are just, trying to demonstrate how clever they are. It's all a performative.
Why do they need to demonstrate how clever they are?
Because they're not actually clever, so they have to manufacture a situation in which they can think that they are clever.
Okay, I would put it that they're trying to establish an identity that they don't have.
Which would be, okay, maybe we agree, which would be
it's a hipster
clever.
Thing. Hipsters are people who don't know what the self is. It's in microbrews.
Right.
I'm an IPA guy. No, I can't like that. Too many people like it. It's been sucked of meaning. I think this is a book for hipsters, actually.
Maybe.
I can't like that music because too many people know about it. It's no good anymore. Somehow, the fact that millions of people have discovered, for example, Turnpike Troubadours means that they're no longer any good, and I need to find a more obscure band,
right,
that can actually be good for me, because anything that's popular is not good. It gets sucked of meaning, is the way Percy would put it. Or he talks about fashion. Fashion is a very, very odd thing. You buy something that it's good. So he says, let's see. Consider the stages of consumption. First stage, you see an article or style worn by a person with a certain authority. First, it seems outlandish, but then you see more people wearing it, and then you try it on. The sales lady says, it is you.
Yeah.
You buy it and wear it. But then, fifth stage, gradually, the new style becomes everyday, quotidian, which is a cool word that means everyday, rendered neutral. Sixth stage, after sufficient lapse of time, the husk or residue of the new style is excreted and becomes an oddity, like bell-bottoms. So think of how that happens. Now, Scott's been wearing the same thing as long as I've known him. So maybe you're immune to fashion, but I pretty much am too. But nobody wears bell-bottoms anymore. They used to be the coolest. Boy, in the 70s, those girls with they take the T-shirt and tie it up here and show off the midriff, and then they wear the bell-bottoms and had the long, straight hair. Think Emmylou Harris. Oh my gosh, it was perfect.
I just closed my eyes and thought Emmylou Harris for a minute. Part of the problem with the fashions is, in order to attract this vacuole of a person, they have to be novel. Mm-hmm. And clothes have been around a long time, so in order for them to be novel, they have to be impractical or silly, frankly, and not fit to purpose. So you end up with a bell bottom. Now, the fact that it becomes a craze is very interesting, but the fact that it then falls out is not that interesting. Like, they should have never been worn anyway. They get caught in your spokes of your bicycle, whatever. You trip on them,
The odd thing is that something which is good becomes ungood.
Yeah.
So you've got bees. They make hives. There's not a point in time where they get tired of hives.
No. I will never get tired of overalls.
Yeah, because yourself is well situated. But fashion is the weirdest thing in the world. How can something that's good become not good? It hasn't done anything. It's just stayed in your closet, and the goodness is leaching out of it every day until it's no good, and you have to get rid of it and buy something else. That Doja Cat wore or something.
Good Lord.
I tried to listen. I was yesterday in the gym. I was poking through the popular videos on YouTube. That music is so bad. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly because I want to get to the Space Odyssey at the end. So question 3 is about the nowhere self. People are surprised to find out that they live somewhere. And that's kind of funny. If you go hear a comedian, the comedian will start mentioning towns and people start cheering. Oh, he mentioned my town. That's odd. Why is it the fearful self? Why is it... I think this is probably true for me. It's why you might be able to speak in front of 1,000 people, but not one. Rather give a speech to a bunch of people than make small talk at a party. Well, and his thought there is, the self isn't at risk speaking to 1,000 people. Whereas it is when you're speaking one-on-one. Johnny Carson was like this. He hated talking to just ordinary folks. Or he hated talking to just people one-on-one. He hated it. But he could do the show every night. He used to have a show, dear listener. It was the most popular show on television, The Tonight Show. Yeah, it continues in question 5.
And 6. Question 6. The fearful self 3. How the self tries to escape its predicament. Thought experiment. In which of the 2 following situations would you find yourself more shy? Addressing an audience of 500 of your fellow townsmen, or 2, journeying to the Valley of the Blind, described in H.G. Wells' story, and addressing 500 strange people who cannot see you. Explain your choice. And I made a little marginalia there. It says, who cares? I just couldn't get worked up about this stuff. That would be completely irrelevant to me.
Yeah, I don't want to talk to my townsmen. The second one, who would you rather be? Would you rather be Mickey Rooney or Johnny Carson, who's terrified and hides in parties, or yourself? I don't know. I hate parties. I don't know. I like them. I hate parties with people I don't know. Hate it.
Yeah, me too.
Sit in the corner.
I have reasons, though.
Yeah, what are they?
I have met thousands and thousands of people in my life, and you have too, and all of us have. And the goodness of fit is just not very good. You know, of all the thousands of people I've known, there are about 11 of them I'd like to have dinner with. And I just don't have time for that. I don't have time. I'm not going to walk the earth long enough to go meet those people at that party and be disappointed by them and so on. I'd rather just go ahead and eat with you and Melissa.
Mm-hmm. If it's people I don't know, so you know me pretty well by now. We've been talking, 7 hours a week, it seems, with 2 podcasts. At a party, you meet somebody. Do they really want to know you?
Oh, no, they don't really want to know me for sure.
They don't really. So,
No.
Karl, what do you do? And then I tell them. And then they walk away. Nobody wants to talk about old books. Nobody wants to talk about weightlifting. Nobody wants to talk about philosophy. You've got a PhD in philosophy. I wouldn't even tell them that. Or they come up and say, "Oh, you're a philosopher," which isn't quite true. But then they'll ask the second question. "Oh yeah, who's your favorite philosopher?"
Who is your favorite philosopher?
It's like it's a baseball game. Who's your favorite player? Well, okay, do you really want to talk about Socrates? Do you really want to talk about Nietzsche?
They don't know what to say. They don't know what to say.
And I don't know how to respond to them. And so what you end up doing, rather than revealing something of the self, you talk about the Bears, which I guess is the football team in Chicago. I couldn't name a player.
I thought you meant like the gay trucker guys.
Maybe that's who they were named after.
The Twinks versus the Bears.
You don't want to, you don't really want to reveal yourself. They're not interested. They wouldn't know how to deal with you if you did.
Right.
And so the both of you probably retreat back into masks, and you're going to act like a certain person at a party. And this is where you get that novelist kind of 3-level, 4-level thinking. It's just exhausting.
When I do the orientation at online great books, I tell people that when we do these seminars, we end up talking about the most important things. When you do a seminar over Plato's work, you're going to end up talking about justice, love, virtue, and the good life and all that stuff. And I tell them that's the opposite of small talk. You can walk into the break room and talk to Steve for 26 years in small talk and not know a thing about Steve.
Mm-hmm.
You might know his girls and Girl Scouts because he's selling those damn cookies again at this time of the year. But you really don't know anything about the guy. But if you do the big talk, if you talk about those important things, if you do a show with Karl about this, whatever, you're going to know something about each other. And that seems obvious to me. And a party, not all parties are the same, but this sort of general party that we're talking about, it's just not even the right venue to do the important thing.
Yeah.
You can't even do it. And so I don't want to go. Now, am I supposed to write 40 pages about it? I don't know. I don't want to go do that. I have other preferences too. Now what should I do?
I want to talk about the Donahue show. Did you like that one?
God. Yeah, I did. I don't know if anybody would enjoy it if they hadn't seen Donahue. He had the biggest daytime talk show ever until Oprah beat him out. Phil Donahue, he was married to, oh my gosh, Mary Lou Henner? Is that who he's married to?
No. Marlo Thomas?
Marlo Thomas. Danny Thomas' kid. That show, it began in Dayton, Ohio, and they ended it, then he moved it to New York City. And it was basically the same format as Oprah's show. That's been off
he's still
air
alive
for years. It's still on?
No, he's still alive.
Oh yeah, he's 86.
He went to my college.
Oh my gosh. He would have people on. He might have somebody who had a new book out and talk to that person. I think he had Ayn Rand on there at one point, and then they would do a question and answer thing, and he would run around in the audience with a stupid microphone and field questions. And then he would have panel shows too.
It was a highbrow Jerry Springer.
Yes, maybe.
But not very highbrow.
Middlebrow. I don't know. The guy was beloved, really. I mean, he was just like an American institution for 30 years.
Well, he shows up in the book.
Yeah.
We get the last Donahue show, which cracks me up. And this is where, for me, the book starts to get really good. Phil's talking about sexual preference, which is a kind of show that he would have. You know, he'd always push everything left, but in a nice way, and, you know, a nice, friendly Irish Catholic way. Well, don't you think that it would be okay? And so he has guests on there. He has Bill, who is a frequenter of Buena Vista Park in San Francisco. You have Alan, a businessman who likes the lunchtime liaison. You have pregnant 14-year-old Penny and Dr. Joyce Friday. They're all there to talk about sexuality, and they're giving the standard answers that you would get in 1975 on the Donahue Show, which is, so what? It's all right. Whatever I do is okay. The Bill says, such encounters as I do have are by mutual consent and therefore nobody's business except my steady live-in friends. Naturally, he's upset, but that's our problem. And of course, Dr. Joyce, which is Dr. Joyce Brothers, but Dr. Joyce Friday.
Right.
It's fine. Everything's fine. Alan goes off to his lunchtime liaisons and talks about the joy of, seeing the woman and, making eye contact, and then you and she have an understanding, and then, going up the elevator, and everything's fine. The wife understands. And then we have Penny, who got pregnant because her best friend was pregnant. And so it's a standard Phil Donahue show. But then 3 strangers show up. And they are John Calvin, Colonel John Pelham, and somebody else, an alien. And I just think it's hilarious. John Calvin doesn't understand the commercial break, so he starts talking before they even make it back from commercial. Says, what I have heard is licentious talk about deeds which are an abomination before God, meriting eternal damnation unless they repent and throw themselves on God's mercy, which they are predestined to do or not to do, so why bother to discuss it? And then you have Colonel John Pelham. John Pelham was a Confederate artillery colonel for Robert E. Lee.
Stewart.
He died in the war. You can look him up. He's handsome. I thought he was handsome. My daughters didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not that handsome. So Calvin says it's all an abomination what they're doing. Pelham says, I thought this was interesting. That's not the way people should talk or act. Where I come from, we'd call them white trash. That's no way to talk if you're a man or a woman. A gentleman knows how to treat women. He knows because he knows himself, who he is, what his obligations are, and he discharges them. But after all, you won the war, so that's the way you want to act. That's your affair. At least we can be sure of one thing. What's that, Colonel? We're not sorry we fought. So for him, so you have Calvin, it's all an abomination. For Pelham, that's just not the way people act. You don't go, you don't go cruising in Buena Vista Park. You don't cheat on your wife at a business meeting. And 14-year-olds probably shouldn't be pregnant.
And for Pelham, it's because the person knows himself.
Right. Well, but he knew himself in the pre-war South, and that's all gone.
Yeah.
And so Pelham's way doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
You got to find a new way. And then the alien speaks up. This is where it gets really interesting.
The cosmic stranger.
The cosmic stranger. It's like the Eleatic stranger in Plato's Laws. I have nothing to say to you about God or the Confederacy, whatever that is. I assume it's not the G2V Confederacy in this arm of the galaxy, though I could speak about God, but it's too late for you, and I'm not here to do that. He says, we are not interested in the varieties of your sexual behavior except as a symptom of a more important disorder. It's that this disorder which concerns us, which we do not fully understand. See, the aliens have figured out that we are screwed up. That we are, by nature, sentimental, murderous, self-hating, and self-destructive. And so it takes the alien story and turns it around The aliens are afraid of the humans because the humans are a mess, which you could see from the guests on the Donahue show. These are not behaviors you'd find in nature. Well, maybe pennies you would. There's something odd about human beings. And so the alien says, well, we're gonna deal with your problem. So within the next 24 hours, your last war will begin. Every American city and town will be hit. You will lose 160 million immediately and 50 million later. He's there to collect a specimen. He's going to take Penny and see if he can raise her and see if the problem is genetic or if it's cultural. And then he says, there is one place where that will escape all effects of both blast and fallout. It's the community of Lost Cove, Tennessee, which is right on the Alabama border. It's an actual place. It's a 1.5 mile long valley. We do not anticipate a stampede to Tennessee. Our projection is that very few of you here and you out there in Radioland will attach credibility to this message. But the few of you who do may wish to use this information. There's a cave there, corn, grits, collard greens, and smoked sausage in abundance. This is the end of my message. Penny. And then Donahue says, we're long. Go to break. All right. So the question, after hearing all of that, would you go to Lost Cove, Tennessee?
Already did.
You kind of already did.
Yeah.
So I like the way he flips it. He's obviously read some of the same science fiction I have. But it's always the humans that are the heroes going into the galaxy to civilize it and bring happy human/American goodness to the universe. The aliens are freaked out because we keep murdering each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't appear to have good self-placement, as evidenced by weird things like fashion and our sexual habits and, gosh, probably Instagram nowadays. And so it might be that if humans are messed up, it might be that the aliens aren't.
But they are too. Come on.
Well, how do you know? I mean, Star Trek aliens are, but they're just humans with stuff on their faces.
Sentience does that. Then things become options, and then errors are possible.
Well, our only experience of a sentient creature is a human being, as far as we know.
Right.
We don't know what it would be like somewhere else. We don't know that it is always messed up. And so that's an interesting question as to whether, I mean, I think that's borrowing from Kurt Vonnegut too. You know, would the aliens be like us? Would aliens have fashions? Would aliens have wars where they kill each other?
So I have this home book group where we read stuff and then we discuss it. And there's a guy in that group. And he always wants to bring up alternate universes or quantum this or whatever. I'm like, well, just make up some more shit. Like, who cares? What are you talking about? I feel the same way about the alien problem.
All right, come on. So this is the question. You said it's a problem of sentience.
Yes.
I don't know that it's a problem of sentience.
Well, I just assume that we are the only sentience that there is, and therefore I think it's a problem of sentience. If there's other sentience, whatever.
Okay, this is why I think it's an important question. If it is a problem of sentience, then there is no way out.
Exactly.
That's just the way things are. There's no cure. Okay. If it is not a problem of sentience, but a problem of humans, somehow some catastrophe has happened and messed us up, then there is the possibility of help. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a possibility that maybe you might be able to fix it. And so you said, for Percy, his faith ought to have answered this. Well, in order to get help, you have to ask for it. And you have to figure out that help is actually possible.
Mm-hmm.
So do you understand where I'm going with this? If having an intellect causes you to be the sort of murderous, sentimental, death-dealing, screwed-up thing that humans generally are, then there's no escape from that. It has to be, conceptually and in reality, it has to be a catastrophe. It has to be something that's curable. Or what would be the point of, so Percy, he was stuck in a sanitarium. He had tuberculosis, and so he had to quit his job as a doctor. And he would read Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky and Thomas Aquinas and ended up being a novelist. Probably helped that his buddy was Shelby Foote. But while he's there, he's got a friend that gets up and goes to Mass in the morning, and he starts doing it. And so he ends up doing it. He ends up making a leap and adopting a faith. Why would you do it unless you thought it could do some good? And what sort of a thing does a human being have to be for it to do some good? You have to be redeemable.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to just treat humans as a merely natural thing, which you've seen doesn't make a whole lot of sense because humans are by far the oddest animal on the planet. But if you were to treat a human as a natural thing, there's nothing to fix. And there's no need for any kind of religion, and there'd be no solution possible from any kind of religion or belief system or anything. You'd just be stuck as you were. It'd be as ridiculous as trying to teach the lion to eat vegetables. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I'm fine with all that.
Yeah, but it's a different thing than what you said. You were saying, well, it's just the way sentience is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just the way sentience is, there's no cure.
That's right.
Okay. What I'm saying is, it's not the way sentience has to be. It's the way sentience currently is on this with humans.
Okay, fine. I'll add the currently in. That's fine.
Otherwise, it's, another version of total depravity.
Right.
Which, what's the point? If it's all totally depraved, then, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So the examinations of the way these sorts of questions can raise a possibility. I'm sorry, this is a modern philosophy thing. We're always talking about the possibilities of possibilities. That help could be sought and could be received.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm losing you.
I mean, I understand the problem, but I don't want to make this a religious show, but I mean, it just fixes this stuff. It just fixes it.
Maybe it fixes it.
Yeah. If we allow the current in there, okay, us sentient things are currently like this, that doesn't mean they always will be, and that it can be fixed.
Yeah, well, how do you fix it?
We don't.
Okay, what do you mean by we don't?
Well, we don't. This is the religious or Christian aspect of this. You don't. It gets fixed for you.
Okay. So in order to be the sort of being that can be fixed, you've got to be different than all the other stuff. You can't be like the natural things. There's something different about you. Well, what is it that's different? Lions don't need any help.
Yeah, it's the fallenness thing.
Yeah. Okay. So that's another way you could think about it. So this Lost in the Cosmos self-help book is an attempt to explain or talk about the phenomena that religions have called original sin,
mm-hmm.
and to do it in terms that maybe a late 20th century person could understand. Because we're told, I mean, if you read B.F. Skinner or something else, or some of these other people, or Darwin, there's nothing wrong with humans. There's absolutely nothing wrong. It's just the way we are. Well, the scientist can't even explain himself. Everything can be explained in terms of behaviorism except B.F. Skinner.
Yeah.
So I think the project of poking holes in all of that, this idea that you can understand everything, including yourself, who are just, after all, another object in the cosmos, that's got to be blown up. That Carl Sagan crap has to go.
Yeah.
And so explaining the weirdness, or you can't explain it, showing the weirdness of the human being becomes valuable. Like in chapter 9 is about envy and about how we lots of us actually like to hear bad news. If you heard that we invaded Canada, or it'd be a good day.
Yeah, that's not the kind of good news, kind of bad news I enjoy, but I certainly do enjoy. There's some bad news I'm looking forward to hearing. Like every morning I wake up hoping for some of it.
Yeah, but I remember how cheerful everybody was in Gulf War I. I remember how, believe it or not, how cheerful many people were after the Twin Towers came down. Yes, they were very, very sad, but they're also excited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everybody had a glow about them. Because at least it wasn't boring. Yeah, he has this question in here. News bulletin. A UFO has landed in Nebraska and vaporized Omaha. This news is for you. A, unrelievedly bad. After all, there's nothing good about the loss of several hundred thousand people. Or B, putatively bad, but secretly not so bad. I don't know anybody in Omaha, and there's something extremely interesting about an authenticated UFO visitation. But all these cases of news that, should just be bad, but maybe isn't so bad.
Yeah, this would make me think about, us collapsionistas, looking for the,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like his bad news that he's talking about.
The collapsionistas want to just annihilate everything that exists, which is probably another thing you'd want to examine.
Well, I don't want to annihilate everything that exists. We want to see the inflection point. We want to see the big turnaround, the point at which it can be improved. It's not that you want to see everything gone.
Yeah, so this is just, you hear bad news about your neighbor and you're secretly pleased.
You're right. Yeah, this is the kind of more petty.
Right. If bad things happened to your old neighbor in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And you would publicly say, oh, gosh, that's terrible. And then you chuckle. I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe maybe you're intact enough that you wouldn't do this. But many of us,
Yeah.
Gosh, that's terrible. Chuckle.